Welcome to Syntax. Today we got a potluck episode for you today. We're going to be talking about Node.js backend choice. Well, if you want to build a quick REST API, what you use in Node. A whole bunch of questions around like full stack. Like what stack should I pull together in order to build like a SaaS app or a CMS that I want to do your own. We talk a bit about when to use a service versus when to host it yourself. That free tier will come and bite you in the butt once they pull the rug from you. Scott is wrong about TanStack Forms and doesn't understand what they're for.
No.
And simple stacks. Someone saying like, was Express in Vue and MySQL the perfect stack? Should we go back to that? Is Next.js too complicated? Well, we're getting all into that, so let's get it going.
I feel like this is the stack-isode, Wes.
Yes, it's a stack. Nothing but stacks. Full stack flapjack.
Full stack flapjack. Let's go.
You ready, Scott? How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. Just chilling, hanging out. Being back on my Mac feels weird. I've just been turning into a Linux boy, so...
You've been all over the Omarchy, using Linux, apt-get, installing things.
I've not used apt-get. There's something called Pac-Man. I've been Pac-Manning. I've been chomping, waku, all that stuff. How you doing?
I'm doing good. We're recording on a Thursday today, which is a little odd, but I'm heading out next week, so we're getting ahead of it, cranking out one for you. And like, honestly, we do a potluck once a month, and there's a lot of questions today. I couldn't believe it. Like we often come back to the potluck and go, man, like we could maybe do 2 of these a month. Sometimes there's just so many good questions. So please keep the questions coming. Go to syntax.fm and in the URL bar in the menu, there's a button that says potluck queues. You can fill that out and we'll answer your question up on an upcoming episode.
So you would say URL or URL?
URL.
Which one?
No.
Yeah.
I just say
Which
URL.
one?
I just
say
like
URL as well. No, I'm just saying you got to make a choice. Somebody says URL or URL. What are you picking?
No, it's URL. But the one
I
thing
know.
I
I'm
do
just saying
weird,
it. Yeah.
Oh, URL or URL. I don't know. They're both stupid. No,
They're
I'm not.
both stupid.
I don't stoop that low. You know what I do say? I say href. href.
You do? You say href?
Yeah, href. Href. It's not right, I know, but I've been saying it my whole life, and I'm not about to change. But let's get into the first question from Finish George. What is your preferred choice for a Node.js backend? I mean, something newer than Express. And how much would you say there is an it depends factor? I mean, when it's basically just a CRUD API. So basically just you're spinning up a Node server. You have a CRUD API that's taking in GET requests, POST requests. There's bodies that come in, maybe JSON. Maybe you need to handle streaming. You know, just your standard REST API that you need to be able to build out with Node.js. And my reach for that is usually either like Hano or H3. And the reason why I'm saying those things is that both of those frameworks follow the standard web request and web response. In fact, like almost everything these days follows the standard web request and web response signature, meaning that any handlers, any API handlers that come in, you will be able to move those from like if you're in Hano, you need to move it to like, let's say you want the functionality to exist in like a Next.js request, or maybe you're using like a Svelte server function. That code will be almost entirely movable, meaning that the URL, access to the URL, access to the body, access to the parameters, the query params, all of that stuff will look exactly the same way. And then the response that you send from that handler, also, those are standard across the board. There is some like helpers for like sending JSON and sending text, but that is different than like Express was, because Express, there was no standard for doing this type of thing. So they just made it up. And now, luckily, other people picked that sort of standard up. But the new standard is web request, web response.
Yeah. I would also have probably picked Hono. I in the past, I've used Fastify.dev and really, really liked it. There was their Eliza. I used Eliza as well.
Yeah, that one's a good one as well.
But to me, Hono is probably just what I'd pick today. That said, I'm usually working in more of a meta framework, so I'm not having to pick up one of these that often. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would probably be it. Yeah.
That's the other alternative as well, is like maybe don't even spin up a Node backend. Like the only reason why I don't use Hono more than that is that I'm often using like a full stack meta framework that also does my front end and handles all that for me.
Yeah. And if you want something that is like really lightweight and you're just looking for something super easy to spin up, Polka is a interesting option as well. This is actually what SvelteKit uses underneath the hood. It's a 90 lines of code. So yeah, it's pretty minimal here.
That's really nice. Oh, because you can specify things like route handlers with like IDs and whatnot in them.
Yeah.
Similar to how you would specify like catch-all routes or variable routes, param routes in Express.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a good thing. I still have an Express app, and I've been slowly like writing like a conversion layer anytime I add anything new, because eventually I'm trying to move myself off of anything Express specific and move to just standards based stuff, so that I'll be able to one day just move entirely over.
Yeah, eventually, right? Next question from Halindra. Hey, Wes, Scott, and CJ. Shout out to CJ. So, after moving my database from Postgres over to Convex, where you would have explicitly chose the index for each query, I realized my indexing was kind of a mess, causing a lot of full table scans. Do you actively manage your database indexes to prevent that? Or is it something you usually only fix when it's a problem? Yeah, so for me, indexing really has always come down to what are the queries that I'm making? What do I plan on querying off of? And like what needs to exist? And from there, it's usually something I take care of when I initially write the schema. I tend to think very deeply about what am I actually querying for and off of what parameters. So for people who may not know too much about indexes, oh man, I wish I knew technically. I'm sure you might know a little bit more technically what exactly indexes are doing. But from a non-technical perspective, what they're doing is when you set up an index, the database becomes optimized to look up over certain parameters in or certain columns in a table. So combinations of columns, individual columns, yeah.
Like if you have like a user column somewhere, and that user column has like an email address, first name, last name, and like social handles, right? You got to ask yourself, like, will I be querying this? Like, obviously you have a primary key, and that's, you're going to be able to pull up that really quickly. But if you are trying to like query somebody based on like, say, their email address, if you don't have the email column indexed in your database, what happens is that your database literally loops through your every single item in your database and will be looking for that specific one. And when you specify a field as an index, it will often scan your database and keep those things in memory or somewhere so that it can quickly look that up. So you just have to ask yourself, like, I always look up users by email address, right? Whereas like sometimes I'm looking up people by some weird combination of it, and the query will be a lot slower, but that's okay. And often what I'll do is, if you don't know it ahead of time, it's going to show up in your stats that you're having very slow database reads. And in fact, we had one in the syntax website where I forget which column it was, but we were not I think it was shows, and we have a show number, and we were often looking up shows by show number, but the show number was not indexed. And as the database grew, the queries got slower and slower. Every single time we added a show, the queries got slower, to a point where we got a sentry alert that said, "Hey, slow query detected." And then we went in there and realized, added index, boom, solved immediately.
Yeah, so part of it, again, is paying attention. That's really what it is. But another thing is, if you want to use a tool to do this, Sentry has slow queries. They have a slow query tool. And just to be clear, we work for Sentry. So this is me plugging Sentry. Sentry at sentry.io. It's a perfect place to find your missing indexes, or even for better yet, track your slow queries, because there is an entire slow query feature within Sentry that allows you, and honestly, I think that's how we found our slow query with their shows, our missing index.
Yeah, that's exactly how it emailed us.
Yeah, it emailed us, right?
It was actually funny to watch the query over time as it got slower and slower.
Yeah, that's actually the best part, is when you make a fix and then you get to see the bars go down in terms of how long it took, latency or whatever. So check it out, Sentry.io. Use the coupon code TASTYTREAT, all lowercase, all one word, and you get 2 months for free. Really, really nice tool. But yes, that is mostly it. Another cool thing you can do nowadays in 2025 is you can ask AI to do it for you. Not like to trust it blindly, but you can pass in your whole ass website and say, hey, am I missing any indexes here? And it might say, you should consider adding an index for this. I've had really good luck with that, because then it's not even like writing the code for you. It's just looking at everything and being like, hey, I notice you're querying off of this, but you're not indexing for it. So maybe consider that, or change your query.
Rip through your code base, find all the queries, and say, hey, you're searching based on these fields fairly often. It's worth adding an index. I have, and also you have to ask yourself, like, do I even need this? Like, I have some queries in like an admin tool that I use 3 or 4 times a year for some reporting, and I don't put indexes on those. Those queries are slow as hell, but it doesn't matter, because I only use it 3 or 4 times a year. It's not worth the extra cost to add that.
What is the extra cost?
The extra cost is that, like, your database grows. So like you could just index everything in your database and it would all be fast, but then the storing of those indexes becomes very large, and you need more memory, or you need a larger database to be able to handle that. So if you got lots of money, you could
make the whole plan out of the black box, right?
Yes, exactly. Another question, a couple weeks ago, we did a episode on like creating a new project, like initializing a project. What do you even do? Planning. How do you do that? So we had a question, which is following up on that episode. When you're done your initial plan, so you figured out kind of what you want to build and how you want to tackle it, what does your actual workflow look like when it gets time to actually writing the code? Do you update your package JSON with everything you know you're going to be using? Do you start with front-end components? Do you start with routes, database structure? Do you tend to scaffold out the whole project first, or work on one section front to back and then add the extra pieces along the way? Also, how do you order the work? Is it core functionality first, or do you get things like auth, translation, etc. set up first? So that's a really interesting question. And I think it breaks down to like what type of application it is. So I thought, like, let's break it down, me and you, Scott. Let's talk about 2 different kind of apps and how we would tackle them. So probably one of them is just like a CRUD app, right? You've got a Node.js backend, you got a React or Svelte or Vue front end, you have a database, you have authentication. What's your plan of attack for something like that?
Oh man, the reason why I'm going to have a hard time answering this question, Wes, is specifically because the only structure I have in planning things is that planning process changes every single time. So it depends on how I'm feeling that day. So let's break it down. Okay, I tend to take something, especially like a CRUD app. A CRUD app, I'm almost always thinking about data first. Always thinking about what data I need to have, what the structure of that data is, and then doing my very best to accommodate for the entire app at once. Things change, projects evolve, but nowadays I am taking out and thinking about that entire data structure first, building out that schema, and then even as far as like planning the UI and front end of all these things go, I will build out the route structure in files before writing any of that code. If your framework allows for that, creating the files, creating the routes, things go where they're supposed to go. And then you start at the root and work your way to the leaves in terms of UI stuff, and then changing and evolving as you go. And I like to build a lot of things my dang self for some stupid reason. So inevitably I'll be writing a form and being like, this should be abstracted. Okay. And just kind of do that as I go. So it's starting at the root and then routing out. So that's pretty much it. And now, more recently, I'm worrying about the UI in Code of Paint at the end because it's easy to change HTML. And if I don't write any classes on anything, I don't have to worry about that. And another thing is the way I work is with scoped CSS via Svelte components. So man, I can just write CSS targeting specific elements and not have to worry about even modifying classes or changing it or whatever. For me, that's kind of the way I go. An interactive component, 3D color pick, those types of things, man, a lot of that stuff I just YOLO. I'm just writing everything all at once. I'm just dumping here and there.
Just going for it.
Yeah. The database, I always talk about bringing a database into this world is like caring for a pet or a child where now you got responsibilities.
Yeah.
Where if I don't have a database, whatever, I can go off and just goof around. But with the database, I'm like, let me actually think about this.
Yeah. So when I have a plan for like a full stack CRUD app, what I'll do is I'll first install everything that I need. So that includes all of my backend packages, everything that I think I need, right? You're not going to know exactly what you need, but you need your server framework, your front end framework, all of that, your database. Then I'll go into database. Usually, sometimes I'll try to skirt it, especially if I'm trying to go as fast as possible. I'll try to I don't know, just store it in a file and whatnot. But unfortunately, I often regret that because then I have to go back and shoehorn it in. So database, often auth if I feel like I need it. And the reason behind that is because when I'm making features, if you don't have the concept of auth or users in your application yet, then it's kind of a pain in the butt, right? It's much easier to get that stuff set up ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Then once your sort of foundations is down, then I'll just go simply feature by feature. I'm not going to scaffold out all of my routes. I'm not going to scaffold out any UI components or anything like that. I'm simply just going to say, I'm working on this feature right now where a user can create, list, read, update, and delete all of those pieces, and then, okay, that those are all on the thing. Now let's go on to the next feature. And then I'll sort of get 2 or 3 features out, and you can spend a little bit more time on what the actual UI works. But I do go the whole the blending of backend logic, server logic, and front end logic is it's just one thing to me these days. When I'm building a feature, I don't necessarily think let's make a whole app API, REST API first, and then I'll go into it. It's no, I'm building all of that exactly at the same time, especially with RPC.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Also, translation, that is thankfully something I haven't done in many years. Multilingual, such a pain in the butt. You certainly will want to have that ahead of time. Because that sucks.
Yeah, that sucks. That's hard to do. Yeah. Next question for Mr. Rye. I've been working as a front-end developer for the past 6 years with a year of backend. I mostly do React and Next.js, and for backend, Node, Express, and Postgres. Currently, I am not sure what to do. I mean, working full-time, but not as excited before. Oh, sorry. Man, I'm reading it. I am working full-time, but not as excited before. I feel like the growth...
You still messed it up. I am working full-time, but I'm not as excited as before.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that, folks. I feel like the growth for me has been stagnant. What do you think I should do to have the same energy as I have years back? Man, I'm just reading. Okay, in short, I need some guidance for the career path goal. Mr. Rye is working, and he's just not as excited before. How about that? Yeah, I think we've all hit this, especially when you have long-running projects. Those projects can get to a point where you got stuff to do, but is that stuff interesting or exciting, or is it the same thing you've done 100 times before, or is it just it's not calling to you? The cool thing here, Mr. Rye, is that your ability as a developer opens you up to be able to experience all kinds of different problems, all kinds of different UIs or backend challenges or any of that stuff. And I know that a lot of this is your day-to-day job stuff, and that can feel tough. But maybe there's something else that can be exciting while you do your day-to-day job stuff. Maybe you can get your day-to-day job stuff done early so that way you can work on problems that are more interesting.
Take on dangerous hobbies.
Take on danger. You can what was that where people were seeing where they could iron in different locations, like they were tightrope walking and ironing or playing chess? That was like some of these things. You could bring your computer while tightrope walking. No, I think really what you need to do is find a way to tap into some bit of tech that is calling you, and that can bring you more interested into the big development picture overall. Maybe there's something that exists in your day-to-day job that could help the org, can help your day-to-day job without it necessarily being on your task list, and something that you can spend some time really diving into. I really think that is the whole thing, is that novelty at the end of the day is always going to be more exciting. And if you can find some way to inject novelty into your work, that is going to go a long ways for improving your motivation. We talked in a couple episodes ago about just how motivating Hack Week was and all those things. And we got a comment on the video from somebody saying, our company instituted a Hack Week, but then soon after, the managers declared that all the projects have to be something that would push the core product forward. And it's just like, y'all missing the point. Missing the point. Like, yes, that's great, and people might find those things, but to enforce that is going to squash all the novelty. It's going to remove all the creativity from it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's removing the entire purpose. So you got to find some way to inject novelty into your day-to-day job.
Yeah, you got to have fun. And we get this question quite a bit, and part of the answer is yes, like work on more stuff, but something that is different, something that is exciting. But also, like, I agree with that as well. You have to always be having side projects and new stuff and be dipping into things like that. Flexing that creative muscle is super important to fending off that burnout, where you're just like, I'm so sick of working on this stupid thing every day in and day out. But also, like, I think there's probably other environmental stuff. Like, if I haven't worked out in a couple days, I just don't feel as excited about the work that I'm doing. And then once I get back in the gym, I'm like, that's it. You know, it wasn't that I was using the wrong AI for this thing. It was that I needed to lift weights. Perhaps there are some non-developer things in your life that are worth addressing as well.
How can you have non-developer things in your life? What does that entail? Like,
that's
I agree.
It's true though. Like my life is very much about coding. Like almost everything I do is about coding, right? And
yeah.
It's hard. It's hard because that's all I want to do, you know? But then the burnout man comes calling, and you're going to get bit.
Yeah, I know.
Loving husband says, "Hey guys, my wife needs a website in order to create and publish content for a personal hobby of hers. She hopes to turn into a nonprofit. The site will mainly be a blog with educational content, but she doesn't want any of the social features like comments or likes, etc. There will also be a page to donate, and eventually, years down the road, a merchandise store. As a mid-level developer, I'm interested in building this for her to grow and level up my skill set so that I can become a senior engineer. I would love your thoughts on which tech stack." Man, so many questions about tech stacks today. Which would be good. I'm primarily a JavaScript developer looking at future JavaScript jobs. I'm interested in building this in Redwood SDK since Peter came on the podcast, but maybe it is too new. I have some experience in WordPress, but I want to choose a path that will help me grow and make me the most viable candidate for future job opportunities. Thanks for your help. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one because you need to think about like your wife, and her hobby of like, you have to build something that is good so that they actually use it. Because certainly I've built lots of like CMSs, or I've built lots of apps over the years, but then like, no, we were just talking about this with Home Assistant as well, where like Scott and I are trying to get our Home Assistants to the wife factor, like close enough that the family will actually use it and it's not like a pain in the butt, right? So you need something that's good on that half, but then you also want to like further your own skill set and learn a whole bunch of new stuff, and it's a really good portfolio project as well. So I think you should break it down into building it on something that is a little bit more stable, because like I agree, Redwood is awesome, but it's certainly very early. So I probably would not bet the farm on that just yet. And start asking yourself, like, what do I need? Do I need a CMS? It sounds like you need a CMS for this type of thing, right? And maybe look into something like Payload. Sanity is a paid option, but also a really good option. You could use WordPress and just use the JSON API and suck that on up. But I don't know, like what I always tell people, don't build your own CMS, because it's that's a hard thing, right?
Yeah.
There's
As
lot
somebody
of
who
features
loves
in a
to build their
CMS.
own CMS.
Yeah.
I built my own CMS like 18
It's really
times.
hard. And then just think about like integrations versus building from scratch. Like e-commerce store, I wouldn't worry about that right now. You know, when that comes time, you got to look at it and be like, okay, am I selling like 3 things and I'm not worried about inventory? Then yeah, you probably put that together with integrate with Stripe and whatever, and that'll be a fun project. But if it's like you need inventory management and shipping and emails, something is out of stock when they need to restock, then you're probably looking at like a Shopify or something similar to that. So that's a whole lot of non-answers of like, what stack would you pick?
Yeah.
I would probably pick a full stack modern JavaScript. So whether that is TanStack Start, maybe look at some of the new remix stuff that's coming out next month. Next.js is a contested option in that case, or go like full stack Nuxt and Vue. That's pretty in demand as well. You certainly want to pick something that is fairly established and in high demand, and right now that is a full stack JavaScript. And then go from there and figure out what integrations are you going to need.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and say tech choice does not matter at all, in my opinion. Whether it's mature, not mature, whatever. Tech stack, whatever you pick, does not matter. What matters is that you make it work, and that you make it work well, and that you make it easy. I have done this so many times, and like have handed something off that like works, and then people go to use it like because it's a side project, it's just for like casual whatever, and then here's a bug here and there, here's a bug here and there, here's a bug here and there. Next thing you know, you got a whole ass job in front of you. Like you're now tracking edge cases, you're doing this or that. Just make sure you understand exactly all of the functionality that is needed out of the gate. You think about it deeply and you make it good. I think that's the only thing that matters. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Next question from RGV Cycling. How do you deal with a toxic work culture whose source is your boss? Oh, man. So it depends, because where is this boss in the chain of things? Is this boss the boss? Like the boss, or is this boss your boss? Because a toxic boss is a problem, but a toxic boss is not just a problem to you, it's a problem for that whole organization. It's a problem for that company. If a boss is being toxic for whatever reasons, in terms of like not being like giving the team the support it needs to complete its tasks and goals, whether that is like being unprofessional, having potential HR issues, those types of things, that is a different situation. I will tell you this. I have been in 2 situations with a major toxic work culture because of a boss. One of which the boss was the co-founder of the company, and I was a direct report. That one, you can't do anything about it. You know what I did? I quit. I said, I quit. I've told this story a whole bunch because it's one of the reasons we started Syntax. They were messaging me on a Sunday at 10 o'clock the week my first child was born because of a broken feature in pre-alpha software. I quit on Monday. And I did not have a job lined up. I just had a kid, and I quit because you can't just live with that. Now, I'm not recommending everybody just go and quit. If you have a unfixable toxic boss, you probably want to see if you can line something up, but that will ruin your mental health. It was ruining my mental health, and best decision I ever made to quit that job. Another number two scenario where I've had a toxic boss was a project manager. I was a part of a team at Ford, and I was working on some experimental interfaces for Ford as like a part of this crack team of like 30 people. And we had a boss, and this guy was a nice enough dude, but he was doing a lot of weird stuff, like saying inappropriate things, getting really aggressive at some of the other PMs and stuff like that. He was my direct boss. And at one point, he stepped over the line several times. And he had never stepped over the line to me personally, so I didn't feel like it was my place to step out, and like it was toxic, but like I was fine completing my tasks. But he stepped over the line with one or two other folks. Those folks went right to HR. And guess what? He got shit canned, like day of, out the door. And guess what? We were all fine. It was great. And in fact, it was a huge, huge boost. So like, if you have like very real, like professional concerns about this person, HR is there for a reason. You can talk to them. You don't have to like go snitching on minor little things here and there. But if somebody has crossed a clear, gross boundary in some sort of way, talk to HR about it. If this person is at all receptive, talk to them about it. Now, only do that if you know that you'd be comfortable with that. You'd be like okay with getting fired potentially for going to them and expressing your concerns about a toxic work culture that they've created. So like maybe, I think ultimately if you're looking for a low friction, if it's a professional HR thing, go to HR. If it is something that maybe even like, I would say going to their boss is something you could possibly do. But like, you have to be very gentle in how you do that. And you have to be prepared for potentially getting let go or creating more problems.
That's a lot of answers, Scott. But honestly, I think this can be dealt with a lot easier. Is you get as big as you can to assert your dominance.
Yes.
Arm wrestle. Just beat him in arm wrestle. Assert
arm
dominance.
Wrestle.
That's done.
You know what? Talking about asserting dominance, my kids have decided that they really want to do thumb wars all the time. And
thumb wars would work as well. Imagine, like, there's no man that loses at a thumb war that is not just, like, broken inside.
Dude, I will tell you what. I destroy my children at thumb wars. I don't even let them for 1 second. Got to assert that dominance.
Oh, man. All right, we got another question about stacks for building a SaaS project. I want to help a friend build a SaaS product. We want to dish out an MVP and aim not for so many users at the start, of course. So you're aiming low. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I can't get hung up on hosting, rolling my own auth, etc. I want to pick a quick and easy solution that would not break the bank. So have a generous free or next cheap paid tier. What I need is server, database hosting, planning on one full stack framework like TanStack. Okay, so he needs a database. He needs somewhere to serve it up, right? And he needs image storage, email sending, and then authentication. What are some nice providers for each? For hosting, so far I've used fly.io. For auth, I've used Clerk, but I've never hosted any images anywhere. Could Cloudflare meet all of my needs? The thing that I don't want to do is go with AWS, and doing that is too much work. Do you have a suggestion for this kind of stack? The goal is to not pay much monthly, but have a functional app that scales. We can start dipping into the bank if we get more users. Yeah, this is the never-ending trap of the free tier. And
yes.
I have had the rug pulled out from under me so many times that I know that you go, whatever. If we get more users, we'll start paying for it or whatever.
Yes.
But man, I have some super high bills of stuff where I'm just like, I don't feel like switching this over. I'm just going to pay the man and move along. So you certainly be very wary of generous free tier, because those generous free tiers are often funded by venture capitalists, and those venture capitalists want their money back. At one point, we had one on the show, and he wants his money back eventually.
Yes.
Plus some. So it's not a nice thing that they're doing. So it's always hard, right? Like do you just go and roll together a million services and then just YOLO it, and then before you know it, you're like, remember we had that like no code guy on, and he said he spends $700 a month on services, just clipping them all together.
Yeah, can't find me doing that. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm a Cloudflare stan. I think that is probably a good. Cloudflare does not send email. You would have to hook up, but whatever you choose for sending email, choose something that supports like an SMTP gateway, meaning that like don't use something that is like you use their SDK to send email and you're like totally locked into them. Use something that simply uses SMTP, meaning that you can sign up for, well, I don't know, what are the ones? I use Postmark, but everyone hates them now because they got bought, and looky, the VC's favorite cousin, private equity, is they just, service goes down, price goes up. What are the other ones that people use?
For email?
For SendGrid, Mailgun, SES he doesn't want to use Amazon, so yeah, he can't use that. So yeah,
Resend is one that people are using nowadays.
Resend is the one that
it does more though. Yes.
Yeah, it does a lot more, but then you're locked into to their system.
Yeah, I'm pretty much always using something like SendGrid or paper
image storage.
The one I've always used. Postmark. Yes,
that's
Postmark.
That's what I've been using for many years.
Yeah. I used to use Mandrill until Mandrill got.
Yeah, they took it away. Image storage, certainly use Cloudflare's image storage. It is extremely cheap. The pricing is great on that. They don't charge for bandwidth, but they do charge for transforming them into multiple sizes and for storing those images on their server. So like doing the math on these things is always hard, because it's really easy just to look at like $20 a month for this service. But if you're trying to like look at raw infrastructure, you have to start doing these weird calculations of how it does. Fly.io, awesome. I think I would probably stick with that, right? You could go like an external database host as well, but you can throw it all on there as well. Authentication, yeah, this is I probably. What do you think? Better Auth, Scott? I'm always 100%. Hesitant to use like a SaaS that is auth.
No, don't ever use a SaaS that's auth. I don't understand that whatsoever. Yes, there are, unless you need like high end concerns, like what is that? A single sign on or Yes, Better Auth is like so insanely powerful. It does everything you need to do. It doesn't lock you in. Like I can't imagine paying a service to do auth, and then now you got another database that's hosted on some other company that's storing just your auth and stuff like that. No thanks. So keep it all in one spot for me, or at least under my controller purview. I know you mentioned the images thing. The Cloudflare images, transform images API is really good. So I've been using that lately. That's been something that's been nice for me, is the Cloudflare images with their capabilities there. For database, Supabase is a great host for Postgres. It's a great way to get set up easily with Postgres. PlanetScale does Postgres now. So you can do either of those two options. Those are types of services that I do offload. We have PlanetScale for the syntax, and I like PlanetScale. So I would probably use something like that for each of those. Again, we said mail. Again, Better Auth for me is the choice for auth.
Other images is like Cloudinary is good, but it also suffers from that like drug dealer free plan, you know? It's very generous, but it goes to $100 a month once you go over that. And that's especially if you hit this place where you're like, oh yeah, we have an app and I want to keep it running and it's not bringing in a ton of money, but like you're kind of just maintaining it and people use it, those like monthly costs can get out of hand really quickly. You could be $600-700 between all of these services before you realize it. Danny Manny says, is REST versus GraphQL still a relevant question? Are there any advantages for going for a GraphQL API over a REST API? So this is a great question. GraphQL, super popular for many, many years. Everybody thought it was the REST killer. And in probably the last 3 or so years, it's sort of fallen out of love. And I think there's kind of 2 reasons for that. So GraphQL seems to be still very popular in the corporate world where people are combining multiple data sources, multiple services all into one. So we had, what was his name? He worked for a big BBC or something like that, big TV vendor. And they have 30 different teams, and they need to have a single API for sending data, performing mutations, and querying all of that data. And a GraphQL layer, this is exactly where sort of Gatsby went with their whole GraphQL thing as well. As a single layer that sits on top of, I don't know, your 40-year-old COBOL API and your 6 different REST APIs and your internal Salesforce weird thing, just as a nice single layer. GraphQL also is great if you want to have a single API for like an iOS app, Android app, web app, TV, all of that stuff. However, it is, for most people, it's not that GraphQL was bad, but most people, I think, found that this is too much overhead. And you found yourself doing way too much work on the server, GraphQL schema, in your database, and then on your client. There's just way too much stuff, whereas a REST API was fine for a lot of people, right? So I would say, go for a REST API, or I would say probably the third option, and the reason why GraphQL fell out of love is RPC.
Yeah.
Meaning that people aren't even building REST APIs anymore. They're simply just using RPC, meaning that they can call server functions from the client, and you don't have to worry about API endpoints and accepting arguments and whatnot. As you just define your server function on the server, you can call it from the client. And obviously there's authentication and all of that stuff in the middle there that will make sure you're not doing stupid stuff. But that, where the TypeScript just flows from the back end to the front end, is beautiful if you are building an app that is simply just back end web front end.
Yeah, I think the what we saw with GraphQL was the hype curve went up, and the hype curve went up, right? And this was all the people being, wow, this is so cool. This solves so many problems I have. And then it got into the point where people are like, everyone's talking about this, therefore it must be right for me. And then they implement, and then they're like, wow, this is a lot of extra steps. Now I'm hitting N+1 issues. Now I'm having to write way more code than I was even with my REST API. Or someone like me, I came from an RPC setup before all of this. I mean, Meteor is essentially RPC in many ways. So like, I went from RPC to GraphQL to REST, now back to RPC. And I'm like, why did I ever make that jump at all, right? So I think a lot of people, like you said, they discovered it wasn't necessarily right for them. And in turn, what happens is there becomes this like pushback, like GraphQL sucks or something like that. When in reality, you just tried to shoehorn it in something that it wasn't made for. And so I think GraphQL, for the use cases you mentioned, is like great solution. There's a lot of great upsides to GraphQL. There's a lot of great reasons to use it in the right scenario. But if you are just, building an app, you got control of the front end, back end, whatever, like I don't see any reason to do that unless you really need to build out this API layer that connects it all. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I like GraphQL personally. I haven't used it in a while because I haven't been building stuff, and I'm like the type of person who hit this isn't for me. This isn't for my needs, right? I'm not building things that need this. So therefore I'm going to stop using it. But that doesn't mean it's bad or not useful or anything like that.
Yeah, depends on it's a tool, right? And it solves a lot of hard problems for people that have those problems. But I think a lot of people realized this is a lot of typing for problems I don't have.
A lot of problems. Yes, exactly. All right, next question from Bob, bob.com. Bob, I think Express plus Vue plus MySQL plus AWS was the best stack I've used in production. I've built large enterprise apps.
Another stack question, yeah.
Yeah. Now on my job, I've adopted Next 15, Payload 3, Postgres, plus Vercel. Although it's growing on me, I sort of hate the direction that Vercel is steering modern web development. Now that React is getting a compiler inspired by Vue, bro, Vue, how is it inspired by Svelte, man?
Yeah. Come on.
That was the original compiler, yes. Inspired, but TSX is objectively uglier than Vue templates. Agreed. And sorry, but Svelte has some ugly templating too. No, bro, what are you talking about? It's handlebars. All right. The Vercel stuff gets more complex, more black boxy, and LLMs often suck with newer technologies. Your opinions. Yeah, I mean, I agree on a lot of this stuff. I gotta say, it's not like, I don't want to declare myself a hater, but like, man, I never understood the Next.js appeal, and I didn't understand the React appeal. And I don't necessarily still understand it, because I was definitely a skeptic of React when it first was announced, and then I sucked it up and used it for 10 years. And then I went and stopped using it and was like, what did I gain? What did I gain there? And personally, yeah, like you can do everything that you can do with React easier and oftentimes with less trouble and better performance in other systems. That's just my thoughts personally. The Vercel business too, the thing that bugs me the most about Vercel is not like them as a company or what their goals are. It's the people who act like hosting on Vercel is the only way you can have good developer experience and an easy time hosting anything on the web. I saw like a Reddit thread the other day, and like there were people being like, I use Vercel because it's the only one with good DevX. And then there was a response to that being like, well, there's a lot of other good options too. And they're like, I don't want to host my own Linux box. Like, that's not the only other option. Like going straight to AWS or running like a Coolify or like hosting your own VPS, it's not the only other option. Then like Vercel, there's tons of other options. Where I think Cloudflare is easy as hell to host on. Railway is super easy to host on. Fly.io, really easy to host on. Even using SST, less easy and more into getting into the weeds there. But like, yeah, there's a lot of options to host that are easy. TSX, man, I find TSX to be ugly too. I'm with you on that one. I could rant on this all day, but I'm not going to. So, how do your opinions, Bob? I agree with you on everything except for Svelte having ugly templating syntax. I think Svelte has some ugly syntax sometimes, but I think the templating syntax is perfect and has never done anything wrong. So, I think you're wrong on only that piece, Bob.
I honestly think he's right in that, like, sometimes I do think about like the good old days of Express backend, simple front end, MySQL database. That was a fantastic stack. And I believe that you probably like that because of the simplicity. You knew it really well. You can get stuff done. You can hop into the app and find where it is you want. And there's not a lot of gotchas in that, like having to know Next.js, and like I know Next and React very well, and I have a swath of weird gotcha knowledge, and then the people like I love React, but the people that say like skill issue, it literally is a skill issue that you don't know these weird gotchas and how these weird things work, and that is fine to have that skill issue because it's not something you maybe should have to spend your brain power on. I agree with you there.
I'd rather have skill issues with the web platform itself.
Exactly. Than having to figure out how like updates and affect dependencies and stuff work like that, right? So I agree with you, and I think like what you should do is there are in every single category there are very simple, easy to use options in there, Hono, Vue, maybe even just go Fullstack, Nuxt. You could still use MySQL, you could still use AWS. It
still exists,
all of this type of stuff. You don't have to. And like on the like Next, Payload, Postgres, like these things they're not making them complicated for complicated sake. They're trying to do things where you can build a fast ass website and host it and scale it and do all of these types of things. But often that means you have to do things in a very specific way, and that rubs a lot of people the wrong way because there's, like I said, there's a lot of weird knowledge that you have to get. So I don't think that like Vercel is intentionally doing any of the stuff. They obviously have a business and they want it to do well, but I honestly do think Vercel cares about the future of the web. It's just that like Next.js is 10 years old, right? There's yes. A lot of baggage that comes along with a very old framework, especially when you're trying to do things like have dual compilers, or you're trying to have a Rust-based Webpack alternative, but also still maintain the old one and still maintain like your Pages API and like there's all of this sort of like baggage that needs to be supported. And then when there are new features that need to come to Next, they have to consider all of that. How will this work with all of the baggage, and how will this work with everything, which is probably very frustrating to have to do that. Yeah,
I think my biggest rub is when like they choose to use their own in-house things like walled garden approach. Like sometimes Vercel really takes the walled garden approach at the expense of the product, the experience, and everything. And that rubs me the wrong way because the development experience is so much better in the extra outside world.
The amount of times I've had like a Next.js question and the answer is a Vercel answer, and everyone just assumes that you're hosting it on Vercel, that is very frustrating because like those things are separate. You know, they shouldn't have to come hand in hand there. Last question we have here from Sam. It says, have you seen the new TanStack Forms? Aren't they great? Fully typed via inference. All inputs are totally controlled. So this is awesome. I actually did not see this. So first of all, there's also a TanStack DB, which is like a local first sync engine. I'm very excited about that. And then TanStack Form is a headless UI for building type-safe forms. And I'm really excited about this because when you want to build forms on the web, and this is not just a React thing. This is works with
this is
with
a
absolutely
React
everything.
Thing. No, this is a React thing.
When you want to build forms, you have to do a lot. You have to have like types and you have to have validation. Sometimes you want to bring Zod in to make sure that the data actually looks fine. And then you often have server-side validation. Then you have messages that need to come back. And like, it's very frustrating building forms. And I feel like I've spent my career building that. It's just forms, you know, you submit something, it sends data and it comes back and you can display messages and whatnot. And this is just a headless UI, which means that like you still bring the HTML, but this brings a lot of the functionality, and you would wrap it. So you can still bring your ShadCN or whatever UI component library that you want. But if you want the functionality of there's validation, what happens when you have a submit handler, saving data to state, and then like fully typed all the way down, so that you can take the data out of the form and use it in other parts of your application is really good. So I'm glad that TanStack is the team there is solving forms, because I absolutely love the approach that they've taken on so many other things, and now to see that they're tackling forms and form submissions and validation. It's hooked into standard schema, which we did an episode on, which means that it's not just Zod, you know, it's any validation library that adopts standard schema can be used.
Yeah. I will say, I think TanStack Form, I love TanStack stuff. I love Tanner. I love what they're doing. I will say that this type of library is solving a problem that like only React has, because when you get into binding form state to like simple state variables, you end up having such an easier time. I think there's like two types of issues with forms. One is that people sometimes control their form when it doesn't need to be controlled, and then therefore like you're allowed to have a normal form and then like use the data from form data or use the data from the form itself and control the form on submit. If you don't need a controlled form, you're allowed to do that in any framework, and people just don't. People are going to automatically wire up every single input to a state variable all the time when they don't need to. So I think that's one problem. But another problem is that complex form state becomes so much effortlessly easier when you have a binding state. You got binding state. You don't have to do on change events. You don't have, the state is just there. It just updates. It's just available. And then the stuff that this would come into handy for would be like the on change async debounce kind of stuff. Like that's where the TanStack Forms stuff would actually help you out. But so many of these things, if you're bringing your inputs,
I don't think you understand what this is. You're saying that this is just like a way to bind state.
No. To
inputs?
No, not necessarily. I'm saying that like forms in general is like it being a React problem. The reason why you need an additional like library to do that in forms in React is because to get complex with it, you then start having to take control over everything. Like what exactly, what problem is this solving?
All right, so I built the submission form on the Syntax website, which can take in there's a drop down of different types of submissions, and then there's a data input. You can put your name, and like I had to build all of this stuff myself in Svelte, meaning that like when somebody submits the form, you go to the backend, you validate the data, you send that back, and then you have errors. You got to figure out where the errors are attached to. If you have fields that are linked together, password, confirm password, focus management, multi-step forms, all of that stuff is something I've had to rebuild. Like Svelte doesn't have any tools for working with forms built in, other than you can submit it to the client. And I guess the input binding.
What does this do that gives you better multi-step forms than just using straight up state and input binding?
This is not about state. This is about validation. This is about handling submission. This is about when somebody types into like a box, or maybe you have like a slider and you want to check if that thing is available. I think
that's just state.
This stuff is really handy. It's not
that's
just state. No.
State.
Like I've built many forms in Svelte, and I think that this would be very helpful as well.
I don't get it. I'm going to say that I don't get a single thing that this would help with that I cannot do with.
You can do anything you want. It's just that,
what I don't see is how is this making any of that easier is what I'm saying.
Okay. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who build very complex forms, and you want all of the validation built in there, and it's not just a simple HTML form that gets submitted and then you come back with any validation that needs to happen.
That's just state.
No, it's not just state.
Oh,
no.
Man. I built some complex ass forms and I had no issue doing
where?
state.
Let's see your complex ass form.
Oh, man, I'm working on one right now. Although I will say it's on my Linux computer. I'm working on one right now for uploading video that then brings back thumbnails. And then if you have thumbnails, you can select the specific frame of the thumbnail. Otherwise, you can have a code or an image input, which then changes all the inputs and specifically the types of fields and everything like that. Not extremely complex, not multi, but like even multi-step forms. Again, it's just a big old state object that is like, what is the status of this form? What's the UI then being shown there? Validation, man. I mean, validation can happen in all kinds of easy ways. I mean, that's not that's not a challenge I have, I don't think.
Yeah. All right. I will say, like forms in React are probably the worst, right? Like it makes no sense that you have to listen for a change handler, and when something changes, you have to then go update state in order. Like that's such a broken, awful way to do it, right? I hate doing forms in React, but I think that this thing would be handy in anyone because it works. They have examples with Vue. They don't have Svelte examples though, so maybe you're right there.
Yeah. I just don't get it. I sincerely hold up that I could be wrong on this. I definitely think that I could be wrong on this, but I've never personally written a form that was too complex that I couldn't do it with just manage state. personally.
Yeah.
That's all. That's it. Yeah. Wes, I think this is the first major disagreement we've ever had on this show.
No. I think
You okay?
I think it's a skill issue. Yes. No, I'm totally fine. But all right, let's get into the last section, which is sick picks.
Sick picks. Hey, I got an interesting podcast. Podcasts for me, I love finding new podcasts, new and interesting ones. And one of the things that always bugs me is like Wondery podcasts, they're 800 ads for other shows and just like how they break up stories. Like Wondery, good production, all that stuff. But like, man, some of their way that they do things bugs me. That said, I was willing to deal with it for this podcast, which I found to be so fascinating. I had to send it to my wife for psychology reasons. But this is called Flesh and Code. And it's really about people falling in love with their AIs and like a AI companionship app. Man. And like the just wild amount of like attachment people would have to this AI. And like it's largely people who do not understand how AI works. So like that, I feel like that's part of it, because when they're interviewing this guy and he's like, I don't know, I don't get her personality just changed overnight, and like his friends are just like, do you not know how any of this stuff works? Like there's not a person here. There's not there's not an entity here. And this shocking amount of numbers, like sheer numbers of people who are falling in love with AIs or like treating them as a real person or trusting them with all this kind of crazy personal information or getting emotionally invested in these things. Man, this was a disturbing and eye-opening podcast for me to listen to. I was like, holy cow. Yeah, we are there. And it is wild to see. Yeah,
that sounds awful.
It sounds awful, and it definitely will make you feel a little ugh. But as somebody who works in this space, I think it's kind of important to understand this stuff, see what's like going on with some people, because you got to prepare some of your family members who might be susceptible to this kind of thing. I don't have any personally, but like, people are getting older or whatever, and the AI is only going to get crazier. So I think chances are it's going to become more of a topic of conversation. But yeah, nasty stuff.
I'm going to sick pick something that is not awful like that. Hold on, let me grab it. I've talked about these in the past, but anyone who doesn't know about Wago connectors, they're good for like household wiring, but also good for like I use them at electronics projects as well. Wago connectors are the best, and the Europeans are going to be laughing at this because these have not become popular in North America until, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And what it is you have a wire in. Let me take one of these out here. If you want to like connect multiple wires together, you basically just open it up, you strip it, you throw it in, you close it down, right? It makes a lot of sense. But in North America here, we use something called marrettes or wire nuts, and you just crank them down together, and then if you want to take something out, you're twisting the copper. It's a pain in the butt, and they're huge to fit like behind a light switch or something like that. So if you're doing any sort of, they're so good. And I recently found these ones, which they're called inline.
Yes. I know about inline.
These are awesome. Ones. So if you have like just 2 wires that you want to connect in a line, these ones are fantastic rather than having to loop the wire back into the bottom of the connector. So and then I also have been printing these DIN connectors. You can buy them that they mount on this rail as well, but I'm working on like a little low voltage project. I would not do this with.
Yeah, I was gonna say these are exposed. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's not allowed with mains voltage. I'm working on what's called a class 2 circuit.
Okay.
Which is that's allowed, but yeah, you could just connect 2 wires together, and especially when you're prototyping things, you don't want to have to solder them together. I use that for a lot of my LED project as well. So big fan of them. Grab yourself some Wago connectors. Do not you can buy knockoffs, but I probably wouldn't. They're cheap. They're like 50 cents a piece. I've had the knockoffs in the past, and they're fine for just like I'd like put like a vacuum line together, low voltage stuff, but I would not ever trust them on anything that has any serious power. And then I would also be very careful where you buy them, because I think there are a lot of counterfeits out there as well.
Yeah, I've been using these for any time. I put a number of like smart switches in our house, and I use those every time. They're just so nice. And they're nice when you're installing things because it all clips on very nicely. You don't have to worry about it pulling out. I do tend to really like them.
They're starting to make light switches
with
them in the back of the switch, like a little clip.
Give me that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I said give me that. I just replaced a light switch last week, and it felt very nice to use my Wagos.
Beautiful. I've actually never used one behind a light switch. I probably should. I've always just used them on an electronics project, and use the stupid wire nuts where you get to jam them behind the thing. It doesn't seem like a great idea. So you're up. No. First time you were right about everything. You got your unpasteurized cheese you're right about, and
unpasteurized cheese. I don't know anything about that.
Now your Wago connectors. All the cheese in Europe is much better.
That's so funny.
Supermarket crap you get here, yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody, so much for tuning in. Please submit your questions at syntax.fm. We'll answer them in a future episode. We'll catch you later. Peace.
Peace.